Hey everyone, welcome back to the Letter to Life podcast. Today you have three hosts, Gio, Jordan, and myself. We are going to talk to you about our personal experiences with toxic relationships and how we chose to navigate them. We hope you enjoy, and let's get into it.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Letter to Life podcast. I'm your host, Gio.
And I'm your host, Jordan.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about toxicity in relationships, what that looks like, how to get out of it, and some of our own personal experiences as it pertains to that. But just before we get started, just a little disclaimer. None of us are licensed therapists. We're not experts on anything dealing with toxicity in relationships or anything
No
dealing
PhDs.
with anything regarding anything.
None of
This
that.
is just solely our opinions, our personal experiences. So, yeah.
Well, Dr. Thompson does have a nice little ring to it, though.
It really does.
I'm saying.
I like that.
Oh, we do have a special guest. Okay, special guest today. Is there any way we can get claps in the mix? Woo! Our great friend and also our producer,
The living legend herself.
the living legend,
Riz.
the Riz God.
Hey guys.
How are you today?
I am good. Ready to talk about toxic relationships and give people advice they did not ask for.
I like that.
That's what I do best.
Okay, so I'll just kind of throw this out into the playground. What is everyone's definition of a toxic relationship? I would say for me, a toxic relationship is a relationship where you feel mentally abused, emotionally unheard, physically abused, and in some cases, spiritually disregarded.
Very, very detailed definition. Mine's not going to be as detailed.
Okay.
Mine's pretty straightforward. I think, from my viewpoint, what I believe a toxic relationship looks like is built on a basis of hurting each other and then forgiving each other.
Okay.
That might be simple, but we'll get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Riz?
I would say a relationship that actively goes against your emotional, physical, or spiritual boundaries. Knowingly.
Right.
On both parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important for both parties to know. Because if you don't know, can you really call it that? I mean,
Right.
sure, everyone else can because they can see what you're not seeing.
Right.
But if you know that it's wrong and the person that is doing it to you or like is being toxic towards you knows, then I feel like that counts.
It's so crazy because I remember my English teacher in high school. I think there's a book called Willfully Blind. I think there's a book called that. But I think a lot of people, when it comes to relationships, they choose to be willfully blind to all of the red flags, all of the signals that tells them that this person is toxic, this is not a good thing for you, and you need to get out immediately. In what sense, and I want y'all opinions on this, so in what sense or in what instance would you recognize your own toxicity in a relationship?
And this is where I might disagree with you, Riz.
I didn't even say anything yet.
Yeah, she says something.
I actually just let out a sigh.
She says something.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if all the
He's
time.
not self-aware.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Go.
I'm self-aware. I'm very self-aware. I know when I'm
He
being
is.
toxic. I'm trying to speak for the masses here.
Okay.
I think some people don't realize they're being toxic until they're out of the relationship.
Okay.
But I'm gonna let you finish.
Yeah.
No, I'm finished.
Oh.
He said that's the end of the sentence. I was gonna say, but okay, let's say that you're in a situation, which I feel like is more often than not, where someone has told you what you've done has hurt me, or like, I don't like when you do that. I mean, it can look like a million things, but they've shown that's not for me. Whatever you're doing is not it.
Right.
How do you not know? How do you at your big age in a relationship not know?
No, I get where you're coming from. I think I'm thinking more of the subtle side of things,
Okay.
especially when you get into the emotional aspect, rather than the maybe verbal aspect of things. I think that's a lot easier to pick up on. But if we are like emotionally toxic, that is a lot harder to, I guess, pull apart. You know what's really good here and what's really bad here. You know what I mean?
So are you saying there's a difference between someone being emotionally toxic and physically toxic?
Well, okay.
What's
Let's just
physically?
say
Yeah. Okay.
we're not talking about abuse here.
What?
There's a fine line.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that for sure.
Well,
So okay,
we need to give a couple other disclaimers.
again, we are not trained in the profession of psychology, therapy,
psychiatry, nothing.
none of that.
Yeah.
None of that. We are just three hopefully intelligent beings trying to make an inference about
Yeah.
the world around us.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you draw the line between we are just being toxic?
And abusive?
Well, I think
Is there a line?
I think if we want to decide where that line is, I think we need to come to a general consensus on what toxicity.
It is like
I know what it is. I know that, like, by definition, I understand what we said, but like, what does that like look like in practice, like in real life? Like examples.
maybe like if you take your partner to do, or like your partner agrees that they'll do your favorite thing with you, right? And like you go to do that favorite thing, and they, once you get there or once you begin doing the thing, they completely withdraw emotionally. They're not very present. They're not really responding to your bids for connection, which is like you creating an opportunity to have a conversation or a moment or something like that, and they just don't respond to it. Like, I feel like us 20 years ago would have called that mind games, when really
Okay.
that's low-key emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're using your attention as a reward, and that's toxic.
So emotional abuse falls under toxicity.
I feel like they're almost
does.
one and the same, but not at, I don't know. I feel like there's a way that we can do it, which you shouldn't. Don't do that. There's a way that it is done
Right.
that is like surface level, and then there's a way that it is done that cuts a little bit deeper and stays with you a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not minimizing like surface level hurt.
Right.
That matters too.
Right.
But there's certain things that stick with you for a long time, and certain things that simply just rub you the wrong way, you know?
Yeah.
I think to be considered toxic, I think it has to align with the principles of what the culture feels like. You know what I'm saying? So I think to be considered toxic, you both have to somewhat be a little giddy or be a little happy about being like a toxic couple. Like that's something that you can like stamp your
like
name
you,
on.
like you like the drama.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Like you and not like you crave it, but it's like something that is defines your relationship with
It
that
spices
person.
it up.
Right.
basically.
It spices it. Yeah, right.
I don't know. I think damn. I don't know how I want to say that. I think when somebody's being toxic, well, first of all, I think there's a healthy toxic and I think there's an unhealthy toxic. Like, of course, the unhealthy toxic can be like, okay, well, emotionally disregarding your feelings, a whole bunch of different things, and you willfully knowing that this is toxic for you. Now, that's the unhealthy toxic. Now, for in my opinion, the healthy toxic would be things that will spice up the relationship or something. And look, it doesn't even have to be.
Gio, you sound real
What?
toxic right now.
Wait,
Let me
wait,
just.
wait.
Okay.
That's like prime cancel culture. Like that's fodder for them.
I think, and no, I'm not speaking of my experience, but I'm
Right.
just saying. I think
You condone that. You condone that behavior, though, right?
Like, are you saying there's a certain level of like childishness that should
that's
be
acceptable.
allowed?
Yes. So like, now this is not my personal experience, but I think it's okay for somebody to crave a little bit of toxicity in their relationship. Now, the level of toxicity, now that's a different story.
Wait, let's get back to why. Why do you
Oh.
feel like that? We're not going to skip over that.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Maybe we should reevaluate that opinion.
I
then.
think like it's always a good thing to have a little bit of bad. Like you can't have bad without the good, and you can't have good without the bad.
Right, but that's gonna come with just like we are two different people, though.
But yeah, like why does the bad have to come from being toxic?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I don't know. Never mind.
Here's my thing.
No.
Here's my thing about it, Gio. I think I know where you're coming from, but I don't think I would label that as toxic. I think some of those things are just innate behaviors. And it gets a little weird when you start getting into monogamous, like polyamory, all that type of stuff. But there's a certain level of innate behavior that people find as acceptable that these individual couples experience. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I'm sure some of that stuff is bad, and some of it, actually makes the relationship stronger afterwards in the long run. But I think once you start moving to the realm, like you're in the realm of toxicity, I don't see a way in which that is good for the relationship.
Good for the relationship for the moment.
Why?
Not something that would be long-lastingly damaging. Like,
For the moment?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's an example of that?
okay, so for example, two people in a relationship, in a sense, somebody playing hard to get. Like, playing with their emotions, but like, I don't know how to explain it, but like playing with their emotions, but you want them to. If that makes sense.
But we wouldn't be dating. That's
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like you wouldn't really know each other. But also,
You can though.
I mean, why would
Well-
we be playing hard to get if we're already in a relationship?
I don't know. It spices it up.
No, I
Playing-
get what you're
okay.
saying.
It makes sense in my head.
I get what
y'all.
you're saying.
It makes sense in my head.
I get what he's saying, though.
I don't. Let's clear that up. What do you
So
playing hard to get in a relationship? Like,
Like something to spice things up every now and again. Are you
okay,
talking about
we
like
keep using
all
that
the
term. What?
okay. I'm gonna put it like this.
Okay, when you say that, that's when it
That-
starts to get
Yeah, see, that's
taken
toxic.
advantage of.
Yeah.
That's toxic.
Playing with emotions is not cool. Chasing your partner or like dating your partner, courting them like you aren't in a relationship is
Right.
cool.
Okay.
Do not play with other people's emotions, everyone. You can play, but not with your emotions.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, Gio. But I think we've found the boundaries of what can be placed within toxicity. What is just relationship management. Maybe that's relationship management.
I like that.
Good phrase. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, and now that's one. Well, I wouldn't say extreme, but that's one side of it. Now I want to get back to what you're talking about, Riz. On the other side of that, where are we talking about? Is this toxic or is this abusive?
I think abusive is like patterns of toxicity, a continual pattern of toxicity. Whereas toxic is like they made a couple bad decisions like here and there that might not be linked to one another. Whereas abusive is like you are actively wearing down, and this is just my opinion, of course, you are actively wearing down someone's health in some way, mental, physical, emotional. Right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. So you think that a toxic relationship has instances of that, but it's not continual?
Okay, I think a toxic relationship, like hearing that, to me, I think the whole thing is toxic. So there's patterns of toxic. So it's probably abusive in some nature.
Right.
But like, oh, that person was behaving toxically, or like they did something and like, oh, that's toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like one or two times, like something that you dish over with your friends and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you'll never believe what he just did.
Right.
And then they're like, that's toxic. And like you have moments like that because, yeah. Well, I'll stop there. Yeah, let me stop.
I think I might be in it like in a left field in terms of how we're looking at this. I think mine is more rooted in the actual culture of it
Okay.
and where it started, where it originated. You know, I think there's patterns in which we've assigned some people of fame, some celebrities with that behavior, and that is toxic behavior. You know what I mean? So, of course, yes, I think with that comes an amount of some amount of abuse in the long term. But I think some couples understand that this is not good behavior, but because it is something that isn't frowned upon, then it becomes okay. I think that's the really important part, that they both feel like this is okay. You know what I'm saying? And not to say that people in abusive relationships don't think that what's happening to them isn't okay. But I think there's a certain level of, I don't know. I don't, maybe there's a certain level of like agreement to it,
Like subconscious agreement almost?
conscious agreement when it comes to
Okay.
toxicity.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
What do you mean by that?
Like, yeah, I know he's ignoring me. I know he's probably out with other women, but I like it because he's just a toxic guy. And that's what I'm looking for right now.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. So as it pertains to that, what are some red flags that I guess signal, just in general, a toxic person? In your opinions?
I think first and foremost, you can tell a person is toxic by the way they like to juggle around individuals. Not to say you're out there playing a field, that's fine, as long as you make your intentions clear. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people out there that don't make their intentions clear, but they're out there juggling a couple people.
I know.
I think that's very toxic behavior.
I think for me, it's someone who knows that someone who actively knows that they're hurting someone, whether that be emotionally, mentally, whatever the case may be, and still being okay with that.
This is for all relationships, for my answer, not just romantic. So I'd say lack of, we were talking about this before we were recording, but lack of consideration in general.
Yeah.
And like knowing that you are not considering another person's feelings.
Right.
Specifically in situations where it is impossible for you to not think about the other person's feelings, and then you still decide to do what you're going to do
Right.
without talking to them or something like that.
Yeah.
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 So again, I think it's going back to just being like, you know what you're doing. It's
Yeah.
conscious. This is very conscious behavior.
But do you think there's room for people who are just doing it subconsciously? Like maybe they weren't taught how to totally respect a person and take their actions into consideration. But I don't know, maybe that brings back to Gio's question about being self-aware and toxicity.
I don't know. I mean, do you give someone a pass for being a bad person?
Depends on your threshold, right?
Right. I think if someone is, if if we are in a relationship and then we had a falling out, and then I tell you a couple months later down the road that I think you're being a toxic person, and you're like, well, I didn't know. I mean, I don't know how much of that is up for debate. I think now, unless you're living for our audience, which I'm guessing most of them are living in the United States, you're not going to be too far away from what the heartbeat of social media is saying.
Okay.
And I'm talking about the pure essential stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I find it kind of hard for you to have toxic behaviors and not know it.
Well, there's people out there like Mr. Tate.
Oh, yes, this is
Okay.
true. Yeah,
And
this is true.
what's that other guy's name? I don't even want to give him the attention or time of day. Y'all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Who are out there preaching to like thousands of people, men and women, unfortunately, who are buying into that, and they think that that's okay
Yeah.
because it reflects what they've seen in movies or shows or whatever. Because there's really not a lot of healthy relationships in TV. Well, not. Let me rephrase that. Growing up, there were not a lot of healthy examples of relationships in media. So these people are preaching something that directly reflects that, and their audiences are going to eat it up because they're like, oh, well, I see that in TV all the time, and that's how I behave in my relationships. And this person on a podcast just said it's okay to treat people like that. So how would I know it's wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that coincides a little bit with it spicing up the relationship.
You gotta stop
Here we
using
go.
that.
Here
You
we
gotta
go
stop
with
using
this,
that
man.
term.
Okay, look, and I only say that because, like, in media, I'm so glad you brought up media. In media, like, you will never see a storyline with a married couple or even friends that are always friends. They never argue. None of that sort. There's always going to be that storyline where, if it's, for example, if it's romantically, there's always going to be somebody either cheats, somebody catches feelings for somebody else. If it's a marriage, it's a whole bunch of different burdens that they have when they want to get a divorce. If it's platonic, then, another friend coming to that friend's life and they're kind of jealous that somebody else is getting their time, kind of things like that. I think that's where people get the idea of, in a sense, toxicity, and they think that that's okay in their relationships, being that that's what they grew up seeing. Like, me personally, I've never watched a TV show growing up where unless it's cartoons.
Even then.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom and Jerry? I'm just kidding.
I'm talking about Tyler Perry. Just say you talking about Tyler Perry.
No, I'm not.
We all it's Tyler Perry.
Mr. Perry, we are so
Tyler Perry all the
sorry.
time.
Like a Family Matters or like a
Family Matters is toxic, or did I miss something?
Wait, what is that?
It's an old sitcom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and a whole, like, the Parkers and like a whole bunch of old TV shows. I've never seen a relationship, or even in this sense, I'm going to talk about relationships. I've never seen a relationship, a romantic one, go like smooth sailing. I've never seen that.
Right.
There's always some type of toxicity in that relationship that breaks it up.
I think I know what you're about to say.
What?
Like, no, not in a bad way, but I think I know exactly where this is going, and it was not clicking earlier. Where, like, you see that, and, like, there's a little argument or whatever, they break up, but then when they come back, they're, like, making up. The relationship's intensified. They really miss each other. It's good. It's
Thank you.
positive.
Yes.
That's toxic, Gio.
That's toxic behavior.
Gio. I knew that's where that was going.
I'm sure it's got to
He
be.
said
Oh my
yes.
God.
Bro, it's got to be from a clinical standpoint that, like, something like makeup sex has to fall under toxic behavior. Not that part, not from the clinical. Like, and I think that goes back to what the basis of toxicity stands. It stands on this. And first off, it has to be in an echo chamber for sure. That's the only way it makes sense. If that's all you're hearing, I'm sure Andrew Tate fans only cared about what other Andrew Tate fans are saying.
Right.
You get what I'm
right,
saying?
yeah.
They didn't care about
They're not going outside of that to get
Yeah.
opinions.
Right.
Like, they don't get it. I mean, they're not hearing somebody calling them toxic. That's not what they're hearing. So, I mean, I think the majority of couples that they see that it's because of their own community that they've built around themselves. You know what I'm saying? And it's a general consensus like this is okay behavior. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, someone looking from an outside perspective, they're gonna call BS on something like that. You know what I mean? And I think if both of those requirements are met, I think that's toxic. And even still with makeup sex, that's toxic behavior.
Okay, now that you've said that, let me circle back to what my remark on your statement, Gio.
Okay.
I don't want anyone to be confused. Kissing and making up with your partner is not toxic. Creating situations so that you have to kiss and make up is toxic.
Yes.
Do not do that.
Yeah.
I just didn't want anyone to think I was saying makeup sex is wrong.
Yeah.
Can we help you, sir? What is y'all's personal experience with toxic relationships? When's the first time you were like, this might be kind of toxic?
Platonic or romantic?
Let's do romantic first and then platonic.
Okay. I would say for me, it was, well, me being toxic or the person being toxic?
Gio, have you
Either one.
Have you been a toxic?
The fact that you had to question
No.
that,
No,
Giovanni.
I just want to make sure I don't self-incriminate myself.
Yeah.
But I think romantically, it's people grow together, right? And in some instances, they can grow apart. But I think the beauty in growing in a relationship and as a couple is knowing that you'll still love the person, like all of their ins and outs and all of their flaws, regardless of what external changes happen in their life. That will, of course, have an impact on their relationship, so on and so forth. But being able to navigate through all of that hardship, but still remaining in love, if that makes sense. So I would say for me, I think personally, in my defense, no, I'm just going to tell myself. I think it's purposely not ghosting, but purposely not responding.
For you?
For me.
Okay.
That's toxic behavior.
And how did that make you feel? I'm just kidding.
And I'll say platonically, my feelings being disregarded.
Yeah, I've never really experienced that in a platonic way. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe that's just like, well, kind of when you were talking to you, what I started to get from it was that a lot of it could be avoided by just choosing the person more wisely. That you're deciding to be a friend or a significant other with.
You're right.
I think you could avoid that altogether. But, sometimes you need to go through it in order to understand what you're looking for. You know what I'm saying? Personally, I had to go through that to understand what I was looking for,
Right.
and for me, it was more so the person thinking that, like, what I did didn't matter, unless it had something to do with them. You know what I mean? So, like, if I had an achievement, it didn't really matter. You know what I'm saying? But if we did something together, that's like the most important thing in the world. So I think that was toxic behavior, and that definitely helped me going down the road.
What would in your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
how should somebody leave a toxic relationship?
I can tell you how I left mine, but I'm not going to tell someone else how to leave theirs.
Okay.
Because I don't know their circumstance. But
Right.
it was very much emotionally and mentally abusive on their part towards me. And then in turn, I learned their habits and would do it to them instead of leaving.
Right.
But eventually, I know this isn't always the best idea, but getting a third opinion, like someone that has your best interest at heart, not just someone who's going to hype up your every word.
Yeah.
Whether that be a therapist or a friend you can trust, something like that. Someone who hasn't heard every negative thing that you've already said about the relationship and who knows nothing about it. Talk to someone else. They can tell you what behaviors might be red flags that you might not be picking up on because you've got rose-colored glasses on.
Yeah.
Or literally writing out, and this is going to sound so silly, literally writing out every single thing that you enjoy about your relationship
that's a
with
good
them,
one. Yeah.
or enjoy about who you are when you're with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then every single thing that you don't like, or something that has made you feel unlike yourself.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 in a toxic relationship, that don't like list is going to be like twice as long as the like list.
Yeah.
You might actually struggle to come up with something that you enjoy about them or yourself.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, maybe let's get a therapist and like get out of there,
Yeah.
because you are going to need help. It's hard to get out of toxic relationships because they're like cycles. Like you get used to it, you get stuck, and you're like, oh, but this is comfortable. And they probably made you feel like you're never going to be able to find someone to treat you better.
Yeah.
So you need to get a third party perspective, I guess is what I'm really saying.
Yeah.
To get yourself out of there.
Okay.
Go to therapy, kids.
I think this is kind of telltale behavior of an abusive relationship.
Yeah. I would have to agree.
Like the highs are high, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the lows, like
Are
they're
low.
low,
That's,
you know?
that is 100% abusive.
Yeah, for sure. I would say personally, how I left my toxic relationship was very toxic. So I don't feel as though I'd be the best person.
Well, don't be shy. Tell us how you left.
I'm not gonna get into specifics, but I definitely made up a lie why they like this could work anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that was at a time where, you know, I wasn't particularly fond of owning up to my own actions. So yeah, I was fine with doing that. But looking back on it now, I was like, well, you know, they went low, and me doing that, I kind of just went lower.
Right.
You know, so. But I think that helped me in identifying toxic people and when I'm running into that. So I don't really have the know-how in terms of how to leave one, but definitely if you did get out of one, understand why that happened. You know, what was going on, what your triggers were, you know, what you felt was actually toxic. So that when you are out there getting to know and dating other people, that you're identifying that within them, you know?
Right. I think for me, this is not going to sound toxic, but I think for me, I'm a very selfish person when it comes to my feelings, so I give my time to, so on and so forth.
We know.
So with that,
Yes, we are very blessed that you're here tonight. Thank you.
So with that being said, I've learned to put myself first when it comes to being selfish. I learned to put myself and my feelings first, just so that, well, in some instances it can be a defense mechanism, to put myself first so I don't get hurt. But I think I'm self-aware enough to be in a situation where I know something is toxic for me, being that I'm so heavily guarded. So if I get the first instance that, you know, this person's treating me wrong, or, you know, my feeling like I have to compromise who I am, or I have to compromise my boundaries just to make something work, or I guess to please the other person, that's number one, that's how I know that is toxic. And number two, that's how I know, well, you need to get out of this relationship, whatever it is. So I put myself first and I say, well, if I feel this, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to wait until it all burns down and all of that, and then now we're both stuck with, you know, bad feelings. I'm just gonna get out first. That does sound toxic, but I'm putting myself first, if that makes sense. So that's, yeah.
So I'm really not, okay. It's not that I don't understand.
Okay.
I'm just trying to phrase my question so that I don't offend you. So are you saying are you like afraid that the other person's going to leave first, so you do it first? Or is it just if you're feeling like this is not for me, I should go?
If I'm feeling like it's not for me, I should go.
Okay.
Because the Geo how many years ago would have stayed because of the other person's feelings. Now, while that is still something that is still prevalent today, I'm not going to put somebody else's feelings above mine when it comes to that. When it comes to, like, if I know I'm being treated wrong,
Your well-being.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to compromise, or I'm not going to sabotage myself to please somebody else and to please somebody else's feelings. It's just not going to happen anymore. So So all in all, if you're a toxic person and you know that you're toxic, most definitely take a look in the mirror and see the things that. Well, first of all, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to acknowledge, number one, that you are toxic. But secondly, take a look in the mirror and see, well, what are my toxic habits in this relationship? How am I making this person feel? Am I toying with their emotions? Am I toying with their mental? Um, and if I am, what tools and resources do I have so that I can navigate through that, and so that I can navigate through that without diminishing or destroying that person's feelings, and thus ending the relationship. Basically, like, how can you and your partner work out, or you and your friend, how can y'all work out the toxicity in that relationship or friendship, to come out as more knowledgeable and growner people? Yeah.
Right. I I would say, kind of some last thoughts about the situation. I think first you got to come to the situation with humbleness and with humility.
Right.
If you are the instigator, if you are the one being toxic, you need to try to come to the situation with some humility, and leave your pride at the door, because there's going to be times in your life where you're going to meet people, and they're not going to be there forever. You know what I'm saying? And it is a mutually beneficial relationship, but you want to be the person to where you get something good out of this relationship, and so does the other person. You know, and I think diminishing is a good word. You know, there's no need to diminish or dampen someone's light. You know,
Right.
especially if they're only there for a season. You know what I'm saying? You still got your whole life to live. And I say, secondly, there's certain things about the overall cultural conversation that we need to kind of look at, and to understand that maybe what is being glorified isn't what we need to be living our lives like. If I'm a 23-year-old college kid, I don't need to be trying to live my life like Drake, and Drake doesn't need to be living his life like me. So
Right.
Maybe trying to look outside of that perspective, and to understand that maybe those things aren't good. Those things aren't good for a relationship. But then again, you get to choose what you want to choose, be who you want to be.
Yeah.
But I think that would help, make a better mutually beneficial relationship.
I agree. And then also, if you're the person in the relationship or the friendship and the other person is toxic, I think you will know when it's time to leave. And then if it, of course, takes a little bit of heartbreak and, abused feelings to get to that point, then I think it's worth the risk to take. Rather than sitting in a relationship or friendship that you know is toxic, you know is not good for you, but just kind of stringing the person along or being strung along just for the sake of something, when in all actuality, you can be happy rather than being in something that you're not wanting to be a part of just for the sake of the name of it. So yeah, any final thoughts, Riz?
I think that if you aren't very good at recognizing how much damage or reward, I guess, you're receiving from a relationship, maybe you should start thinking about how you feel versus how you want to feel. Because the best thing that you can do for yourself in those situations is think about yourself,
Yeah.
honestly. And if how you're feeling doesn't match how you want to feel, A, go to therapy, and then B, get out of the situation. Obviously, it's not always that easy, but if you have the resources to help yourself get out of there, the best thing you can do is educate yourself on how to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can start with how you're feeling. So, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Let Us Alive podcast. I'm your host, Gio,
I'm Jordan.
and you've been listening to Let Us Alive. Thank you.